Hello, and welcome to Pagan Perspectives by Georgina Rose. I am your host, Georgina Rose. I'm a perennialist and polytheist, and in this podcast, I give pagan perspectives or approaches, metaphysical understandings, and insight into the issues that we deal with in our mundane lives, helping us bridge the gap between the mundane and the esoteric. And in this episode, I'm going to be exploring a wide range of topics that sort of fall under the same general category of discussion. And that is, the things that happen to us when we and our body of light is in a completely different state. The specific things that I'm going to be discussing are dreams, dreaming, lucid dreaming, astral projection, sleep paralysis, um, and dream initiation. So, all of these things are very linked, even though they describe a number of different experiences, right? And some of them we understand more obviously as spiritual experiences, right? Specifically, when people discuss sleep paralysis, they understand that there is something non material happening because there is no, at this point in time, medical explanation as to why sleep paralysis happen and why people have weird experiences with sleep paralysis where they even say they see demons, right? And then with dreams, I mean, there's a whole robust esoteric understanding of dreams. A lot of people, dream analysis is their gateway into esoteric philosophy and thought. Specifically, Carl Jung, one of the most important psychologists in history and who really did the bulk of our psychological understanding of dreams, was quite Gnostic in his approach. He was very esoterically oriented. So all of this kind of lumps together, and I'm going to explore basically why all of this happens, the metaphysical understanding of all of it, and what it can mean for our spiritual path. Because the thing is, this is a huge part of our life, right? We think of our life as the time when we are awake. For most people, they think of life as, going through your day-to-day life. But the thing is, about a third of our life is spent dreaming. About a third of our life is spent unconscious. And when we understand from a metaphysical approach that all things are connected, right? That there is no separation between things, that as above, so below is a cosmic law. It inherently means that those 33% of our life that we are in a dream state has meaning and purpose. And I think the first thing that people are going to wonder is, well, two things. One, I don't dream, so this doesn't apply to me. So everyone dreams. The thing is, not everyone remembers their dreams. And thought two is, well, I don't remember all of my dreams, so I'm only, remembering part of this portion of my life. And the thing is, you are dreaming the entire time you are asleep. But the dreams that we remember are the ones that happen as we sort of enter into a sleeping state and when we come out of it when we wake up. Most dreams that people recall are actually that second one. Most dream recall is the last dream you had before you woke up. That's typically the remembered one. And we understand that when we're sleeping, we're actually kind of going through a series of sleep cycles throughout the course of the night where we'll enter into new dreams, we'll enter into varying states, and we actually on a neurological level see the brain light up in different ways depending on what phase of sleep someone is in. And there's been a lot of neurological and psychological research exploring our different sleep states. But what our dreams mean and where we go when we dream on a spiritual level is not really understood by science. The scientific understanding of sleep really relates to sleep cycles, the role that sleep plays in our health. While we don't understand sleep fully, it's very clear that sleep is a vital part of health. And yeah, it's interesting because sleep, while we understand some of it, we understand it's important. We understand that without it, we will go insane. We understand that our dreams often relate to our subconscious. There's so much unknown about it, right? I think of it like the ocean, right? The ocean is, a huge part of Earth, but we don't fully know what's happening, right? Sleep is kind of the unknown. And yeah, let's explore what happens on a spiritual level because spirituality often has answers where science does not, right? And often what science is doing is it's playing catch up to esoteric wisdom. So the first question is, what happens to us when we're dreaming? What happens to us when we sleep? Where do we go when we sleep? So we need to understand that we have two bodies, okay? I know that sounds weird. Only one is a physical body, but there are two spiritual bodies within us, right? There is our physical body. That's body number one, right? That's our flesh, right? That's what we live in this incarnation. That's the one that feels pain. That's the one that touches, the one that tastes, the one that hears, the one that sees, the one that relates to all of our five senses. And then there is the body of light, or the metaphysical body. And this is the body within our body. It is our spiritual form. And when you look at the anatomy of the physical body and you look at the anatomy of the spiritual body, you actually see some parallels with things like chakra systems and energetic systems really lining out an anatomy to the spiritual body. And these things are normally completely connected, right? Normally, our body of light is inside of our physical body. But when we dream, a number of esoteric traditions posit that the spiritual body can perhaps slightly detach or even leave the physical body. The most extreme form of this is obviously astral projection, when the body of light completely severs from the physical body while remaining a sort of tie. So, we understand these things are linked. And as long as you are living in your body and you are alive, there is still some sort of connection, right? When I say where do we go and it disconnects, I don't mean fully. The body of light cannot fully separate from the physical body until the point of death. The Tibetan Buddhists describe that the end of the physical life is when the soul is severed from the body, right? Your soul has existed before your physical body existed, and it will outlive your physical body. But when you are alive, they are connected, and you do not ever fully want to sever these things. That would mean death. So, when you are in these other states of being, when you are having experiences outside of the physical world and on a sort of different plane, your body of light is somewhat disconnected, or perhaps a little apart, but there is always a connection. And the term etheric tether is often used to describe this connected state, right? When you see drawings of people in a state of astral projection, the way that it's drawn is there's a body in the bed and there's like a string, and then there's the spiritual body detachment, right? There is always that tether there. There is always a linking. And that is why physical and spiritual health are linked, because your physical body and your etheric double, your spiritual body, are literally tethered to each other. When one is damaged, so is the other. And that's why when people enter deep spiritual states of suffering, such as despair, they suffer physical health problems. I've explained this triangle metaphor that I was taught by a teacher when I was very young, of think of your physical, mental, and spiritual health as a triangle. And on one end of the triangle, write physical, on one end of the triangle, write spiritual, and on one end of the triangle, write mental, right? If one of these things goes away, the triangle falls apart. So you need to take care of all of these things. You need to take care of your physical, psychological, and spiritual health. And because they are inherently linked, you cannot neglect the physical body and, keep the spiritual body intact. Now, when we die, this becomes a little more complicated, because death is essentially the spiritual body being, split from the physical body. And death will happen to us all. Death is natural, but you never want to, embrace death before that time has come, right? It's a perversion of the natural order to have any sort of weird belief where, like, you intentionally try to split these things. And that's where really dark ideas come in, where some people think like ritual suicide is a good thing because it's a way to, like, release your material attachments or whatever. Don't ever do that. That is a evil idea. You are tied to this body for a purpose. This life exists for a purpose. You should not do anything to split that. But when you die, that tether is cut, right? The Tibetan metaphor of a severing makes a lot of sense when we consider that the perennial image of the way the body of light and the physical body are linked is through a literal cord. Think of it as the cord being cut. And, we see as above, so below throughout everything, right? Everything parallels, everything connects. And think about it, when a baby is born, when that baby becomes, independent from the mother and has, been birthed, right? The first thing that happens is the umbilical cord is cut. Think of your spiritual tether as the umbilical cord to this world, right? If a baby was in the womb, right, and they had not been born yet, and that umbilical cord was cut prematurely, what would happen? That baby would obviously die, right? Because the umbilical cord is how they get, food and nutrients from the placenta, which is their source of nutrients that comes from the mother, right? Your tie is essentially your umbilical cord that you have throughout life. So, keep this cord intact, take care of it, and understand that the physical and the spiritual are connected. But of course, when we are in other states, they can be a little bit looser than they would be when we're awake. And this is also kind of true for deep trance and deep meditative experiences, scrying and whatnot. Like, there are certain other spiritual experiences that can kind of start to have these things work in a strange way, but generally they are fully connected when you are awake. And I'll get into more of that kind of later, and what's going on with those kind of like liminal spaces where you're awake, but there is a level of spiritual connection. So when we look at the anatomy of the body of light, one thing that is most understood as part of the anatomy of the body of light is the third eye. So, the third eye is awake when the body of light is activated and in motion, right? That's why when a lot of people undergo spiritual awakenings or initiatory experiences, they have a third eye awakening type experience. Now, I highly reject the idea that you should intentionally force your third eye open. I do not think people should force experiences onto them that they are not ready for. When you undergo initiation and when you have spiritual growth, your third eye will naturally open with time. Opening it prematurely is putting the horse ahead of the cart. Well, getting the cart before the horse. You know what I'm saying? Obviously, you get it. You get where I'm going with this, right? Like if you are not ready to have a third eye awakening and you force it open, it can cause problems because you just are not at the level of spiritual development where that's happening. But when you are, say, in dreams, even if it's not, open in a waking state and those things had not started to cross, your third eye is activated. And that's why psychologically, and then this is where the science starts to bridge, because the current understanding of psychology is that what we think about and what we focus on in our dreams is what our subconscious is concerned about. So, psychologically and spiritually, we understand there are parts of the soul or the mind, right? There is not just, the ego self, right? There is, the subconscious, there is the id, right? There's a lot of different parts of the self. And there is the shadow. The shadow is the repressed self, right? And when we're looking at dreams, we're looking at the shadow, we're looking at the subconscious. We are not looking at the conscious mind, and we are not looking at the higher mind, right? Because we have, those deeper parts of the mind, those subconscious parts. And then we have, our base self. And then above that, we have sort of the enlightened self, the higher self, right? We're looking at the lower forms of the self when we're talking about what we experience in dreams. And what we see in dreams are what our subconscious is telling us. That is understood by psychology. Interestingly, every single face or human that you ever see in a dream, you have seen in real life, right? Dreams do not produce new images that were not already in your consciousness in some way, right? Every dream you have is telling you something, no matter how bizarre or weird it is. And actually, I had some skepticism about this until I started dream journaling and exploring the meaning of my dreams, because I thought like I get some weird dreams. I get some, strange, like psychedelic style randomness, right? And for a while, I was every single morning dream journaling. I had this dream journal, and the first thing I would do every day, it had like it was like organized into sections. So it had description of dream, symbols in dream, and possible theory of meaning. And when I started doing this, I did this every single morning for months. Every day I actually recalled more and more of my dream. Like every day my ability to remember my dreams was just stronger, right? And whenever you're doing, even if you just wake up and think about what you were dreaming is the first thing you think about in the morning, the more you like focus on dream recall, the more dream you will actually recall and understand. And what I started doing is once I started filling out these forms, like I would start writing and then I would remember more and more of my dream, like it would come to me. And then I would think about the meaning. And once, I started doing it enough that I was able to recall a significant portion of my dreams, the meanings actually became incredibly clear. Even those really disjointed, bizarre dreams, I could see what my subconscious was telling me, right? And so understanding your dreams is a way to understand what you are concerned about and what's going on in the self that you don't see. Because the thing is, our conscious mind is like the top of an iceberg, right? What we think about in our conscious mind is not everything we're concerned about. And humans, we have this dissociative tendency, especially in modern culture. I think modern culture really, really pushes this, right? We want to be disconnected from our feelings. We want to be numb. We want to just go throughout the world and not have to deal with the hard stuff, right? We want to dissociate. We are like a society that craves and yearns and brings in dissociation whenever we can, right? We're constantly dissociating. And when people are in a dissociative state, which most people are in a dissociative state to some extent. I mean, of course, there's extreme versions of people who will be, say, diagnosed with mental illness, but they'll have no idea why they were ever diagnosed with that. Or like they'll get random panic attacks and they'll have no idea why they're having panic attacks, right? People in those situations are, of course, the most dissociated because they are actively in a state of pain, but they can't identify where that pain is coming from. But for many people, they're in a lesser state of dissociation, right? Like they generally have some level of awareness of their life, but they don't see all of it, right? There's things that, pop up. They'll get like, they'll respond to a certain smell really negatively and they'll not know why. Like every time they smell that, they get anxiety, right? And then they need to understand it. They need to actually get rid of their dissociation. They need to take away the dissociation from the self. And you cannot fully undissociate without looking into your subconscious, because often, if you are in that dissociative state, your subconscious is screaming at you, right? Your dreams are screaming at you that you need to pay attention to certain things, but we reject it, right? We want to stay dissociated because that's comfortable, that's soft, that's easy. And it is so vital for people to undo that dissociation and process what's going on. And dreams for so many people are the way that they can do that, because they're so detached that it is the root into itself. And even if you're not dissociated at all, right? Even if you have a pretty solid understanding of yourself, we all have things we don't fully get, right? There's a reason why know thyself is literally considered a mystic goal, right? In the Hermetic tradition, know thyself is considered like an aim, because knowing thyself is not easy, right? Humans are complicated, humans are multifaceted. It's very hard to fully understand the self. And by understanding your dreams, you can understand so much more about yourself. Now, I want to talk, spiritually where we go during dreams, essentially. So when you look at, Western esotericism, there's this popular system that comes in called Kabbalah. So Kabbalah has its earliest roots in Judaic mysticism. But the thing is, the Kabbalah that Western occultists use is not really Jewish Kabbalah. It's called Hermetic Kabbalah. It's spelled differently, and there's a lot of major changes to the system, to the point where it's arguable that it's kind of a different thing, that there's big gaps. And I, of course, as a Western esotericist, am much more familiar with and much more interested in Hermetic Kabbalah, because actually Hermetic Kabbalah, out of all the Kabbalias, is the most practical oriented, and it is the one that is the most, practitioner focused, right? If you get into like traditional Christian or Judaic Kabbalah, it's much more just pure mysticism. It's a very, very different beast. But when we look at Hermetic Kabbalah, they have this thing, and this exists in all the forms of Kabbalah, but I'm going to explain it through the Hermetic interpretation because that's what I understand. Well, the tree of life. And the tree of life basically posits that there are veils of nothingness, and then out of nothingness, there is a spark of divinity where the Godhead begins. And then the Godhead emanates downwards through these 10 sphirot, or spears. Arguably 11 if you want to count Dot, or the spear of non-existence. But basically, this is like a hierarchical chain of being that's, divinity coming down towards this world, right? And it's a number of realms, a number of planes, a number of types of existence. There's Keter, then Chokmah, then Bina, then Hesed, then Gavorah, then Tiferet, then Neztok, then Hod, then Yesod, then Malkut. And when you're in your waking material form, you're in Malkut, that 10th spear, that bottom spear. But when you are dreaming, or you are in a trance, or you are astral projecting, or anything like that, you're in Yesod, the 9th spear, the one right above Malkut. So Malkut is the spear of Earth, and Yesod is the spear of the moon. And I think it's worth exploring what the moon represents, because the moon is the metaphysical ruler of all of these things, right? The moon is a luminary, or a, thing that seems to produce light. And the moon is feminine. The moon is associated with the goddess. It is all about the subconscious, the intuitive dreams, the internal emotions, feelings. It is that kind of feminine, intuitive version of the self. And in duotheistic pagan traditions, where they pick one god and one goddess to worship, they typically pick a moon goddess as the goddess, because your god can represent the material world, like nature, the sun, but your goddess can represent all these other states, like the moon and intuition and all of that. So what does this mean? What does this mean in practice? So Yesod is a spear above Malkut, meaning that in this Hermetic Kabbalistic interpretation of the dream state, when you are in a dream, you are not in the material plane fully. You have started to lift above the material plane and you begin to get closer to higher levels of being, higher layers of being. And actually, within Hermetic Kabbalah, the goal of the magician is to climb the tree of life and get as close as possible to the top spear, Keter, which is that another center sphere, and it is all about, the Godhead, right? The goal of, Hermetic Kabbalah is to unite with the Godhead and to sort of crawl upwards. And when you are in Yesod, you've already crawled a little bit upwards, meaning that for the Hermetic Kabbalist, when you explore your dreams, you actually are getting closer and closer to divinity and closer to the Godhead. And so by, understanding these states, you actually are doing the great work and making serious spiritual progress on your evolution. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is sleep disturbances. I'm going to get into sleep paralysis in a moment. Obviously, I've talked about how sleep is a higher state, sleep is a lunar state, and sleep is a state in which you are interacting mostly as your body of light. Of course, you remain tethered to the physical body, but you're mostly sort of moving from the body of light, right? And you're moving from the subconscious mind. So, what does it mean when people have severe sleep disturbances or insomnia? These are common problems, and they actually have spiritual connections. When you are struggling with sleep, you are struggling with your intuitive and conscious mind, and you are often spiritually disconnected from the divine feminine, because obviously the realm of sleep is the realm of the divine feminine because it is a lunar state. So, when people have sleep disturbances, it typically has a lot to do with problems in their lunar life. That is your feelings, your emotions, your subconscious, and repression. So people who have sleep disturbances typically have psychological things going on. And actually, when you look at psychiatric literature, you can see that insomnia and sleep disturbances are heavily correlated with trauma and with mental health issues. So if you are having sleep disturbances, that is a sign that there could be something negative spiritually going on with you or negative psychologically going on with you. And so I would immediately, if I was having sleep disturbances, I've mentioned before that I have at various points in my life struggled with insomnia. I don't struggle with insomnia anymore, but I did struggle with insomnia for a long time, especially when I was a kid. I had pretty bad insomnia when I was a kid. And what I've noticed is periods of my life where I have been, kind of an insomniac are periods when there were things in my emotional and subconscious mind that I had not understood and I had not worked through. And whenever I'm in a good place, right? Like parts of my teenagerhood now, like different parts of my life, my sleep regulates. So I think it's very much worth seeing and leaning into what is this insomnia, because I theorize, now I don't have as much data for this one, but that insomnia is a way to avoid the subconscious mind. So there are people who are afraid of sleep, right? They're called somnophobiacs. They are people who are literally afraid of going to bed. And somnophobia is rooted in typically the fear of bad dreams or the fear of the unknown, right? They don't want to go to bed because they're worried they're going to have night terrors. And for people who do have night terrors and extreme nightmares and horrible, horrible dreams, that is your subconscious telling you something. Whenever you have night terrors or nightmares, right, you should immediately pay more attention to that dream, because that is basically your subconscious throwing 15 tarot tower cards at you and telling you to watch out, right? Those fears are not just random bad dreams. They are coming from somewhere. Think about why children, when they have nightmares, often have nightmares about monsters, right? What do monsters represent, right? Monsters represent, big things out of their control, right? Children are scared of change that is out of their control, right? They're scared of things outside of, the bubble that they live in because they're kids, right? And so when kids have those nightmares, that's what that's representing, right? It's, when kids start having nightmares, right? Like when those nightmares start kicking in, it's often when they are starting to get old enough to have an understanding of the world, right? The nightmares don't typically happen when they're babies, right? They happen when they're 4 or 5 and they're starting to see the world and develop fears and anxieties and confusion about everything that's happening around them. So when you have nightmares, there are things that you need to understand and work through, right? It could be transitional. Like people often have night terrors when they're younger, because when you're younger, you're approaching puberty, you're approaching transitions, you're discovering more about the world, right? Whenever people are going through major transitions, that comes with fear, because one of the most common things for humans to fear is the unknown, and transitions are inherently moving towards the unknown. So that's why I think sleep disturbances are correlated there. And for somnophobiacs, they are afraid of their subconscious on some level. They are afraid of what their dreams are telling them. They are afraid of what is going on in their mind. And so when you have sleep disturbances, or nightmares, it's a big sign to investigate yourself and possibly even do shadow work. So shadow work is a technique that comes from Jungian psychology. And basically what you do is you see the self and you see that there's a shadow self or repressed self. And you actually, instead of, ignoring or trying to kill the shadow, you lean into it, you explore it. And then once you explore it and you understand it, you can integrate it and make it part of your whole self. So through something like shadow work integration, you can kind of get away from these nightmares and sleep disturbances. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is sleep paralysis. So sleep paralysis is a really interesting phenomenon because it is the one that people immediately understand as spiritual, because a lot of people have extreme spiritual experiences in a state of sleep paralysis, because it is one of the most unique and fascinating forms of human consciousness that we have, right? Because sleep paralysis, you are asleep, but you are simultaneously awake. So essentially, how sleep paralysis works on a medical level is your body has fallen asleep, but your mind has remained awake and aware. So I have actually experienced sleep paralysis. So I can speak to the sleep paralysis experience. Essentially what happens is you know how like when your foot falls asleep or whatever, it's like pins and needles and shaky and strange, and you have a little less motor control over it than you normal. It's like that for your whole body. You kind of can't move, but your mind is as if you are awake. It's a very freaky state, and a lot of people find sleep paralysis incredibly disturbing, right? A lot of people find it terrifying. Um, and when it is involuntary, sleep paralysis is absolutely terrifying. Note that I said involuntary. There are times when people voluntarily induce sleep paralysis, they just don't think of it like that. And I'm going to get to that in a second. That probably sounds very startling to people. But involuntary sleep paralysis is absolutely terrifying because you are awake, but you are asleep. It's an unknown thing, right? That fear of the unknown is very normal. So I actually, when I was experiencing sleep paralysis, this was when I was about 17, 18. It happened every now and again. And this was actually right around the time that I started exploring spirituality for the first time. Now, I had been exploring spirituality for a number of years before this point, to be clear, but I was exploring it on a deeper level at this point. Like, I had been a practitioner for a bit. As you guys know, I've been into the occult since I was a teenager. But at this age, I was starting to get closer to finding my proper path because, like most people, when I started exploring spirituality, I did not immediately start with the practice I had now, right? Like I started with some fluffy stuff, some light stuff that is just totally not what I would be into now. So, after, exploring my sleep paralysis, I talked to a doctor about it when I had a checkup. So I had like a, general checkup, and I decided to ask the doctor what they thought was the cause of sleep paralysis. Like, what does it mean? And the conversation they had with me was really fascinating because basically what they told me is, we do not understand sleep paralysis. We don't know what happens when people experience sleep paralysis. Like it's actually a mystery to us. We know it exists, but we don't know why. And we know that a lot of people have really weird experiences during sleep paralysis. And then they proceeded to ask me, "Do you meditate?" And I was like, "Yeah, I actually do meditate. I'm really into the esoteric. I do a lot of like, spiritual stuff." I didn't want to get into like all the craziness of my occult practice to my doctor because I just didn't need to. So I just said, yeah, like I'm very spiritual. And he said, "You know what's so interesting? Most of my patients who report sleep paralysis actually do meditate. There seems to be some sort of connection between it and spiritual practices." And that really got me thinking. And I began to meditate every night and really focus in on meditation. And I noticed when I meditated in a sleeping type position right before I went to bed, I was more likely to enter into sleep paralysis. And so I noticed, okay, there is absolutely a spiritual connection between practice and sleep paralysis. So what's going on? I think for a lot of, Christians, they could go, well, that's a smoking gun that all spirituality is demonic. But the thing is, that's a misunderstanding of what sleep paralysis is. Because once I really, really delved into spirituality, I started to understand what actually happens. So now, and I'm going to get back to sleep paralysis, demons, and negative experience, but I'm going to start with getting into the positive. So, a lot of esoteric practices actually involve inducing sleep paralysis. That sounds insane because people think of sleep paralysis as a horrifying and awful experience. But there are a number of spiritual practices that literally are self-induced sleep paralysis. But those experiences are not scary. Those experiences are positive. That's why people don't call them sleep paralysis, right? Sleep paralysis has this really negative connotation to it. So I want to talk about spiritual practices that are literally self-inducing sleep paralysis. And there is one esoteric discipline that is literally self-induced sleep paralysis as its entry point, and that is astral projection. So, astral projection is a spiritual technique, and I'm going to explain how people start to astral project, and you're going to see how this is sleep paralysis when I go through this. So, astral projection is when you take your body of light and you leave your physical body while maintaining an etheric link, and you do a number of things, right? People use astral projection to have specific mystical experiences, right? To explore other planes of being. Certain like initiatory experiences are inherently astral projection based. Certain witchcraft practices are astral projection based, and remote viewing is astral projection based. Astral projection and remote viewing are not. I mean, they're not exactly the same thing, right? Every time you're remote viewing, you're astral projecting, but not every time you are astral projecting are you remote viewing. So remote viewing refers to basically leaving the body and wandering around, like basically, taking your body of light out of your physical body and exploring the material world, right? Remote viewing was a big hot topic during the 1900s, specifically during the Cold War. So during the Cold War, there was a lot of research into the idea of remote viewing from both the American side and the Soviet side. Basically, they wondered if they could get, and they did this on both sides, advanced spiritual practitioners to remote view and spy on the other power. I know this sounds made up, okay? It sounds ridiculous, but it is true. And the CIA declassified documents showing that they explored remote viewing. And you can actually read the remote viewing experiences that were conducted by the CIA and read what the data came out with. And I have actually read the entire thing. So, people really make a lot of wild claims about these experiment results. Some people say that the CIA proved remote viewing is real. Some people say that they debunked it. So I actually read all of it. And the remote viewing experiments were somewhat inconclusive. So basically what they did is they had a bunch of people who claimed they could remote view sit on tables, and they would hide objects, and the remote viewers would find the object while remote viewing, and then they would come back to their body and then guess where the object was, right? And it actually worked a decent amount, right? Like disproportionately, the remote viewers actually did find the object, like at a pretty high rate, but there were some that failed. So the remote viewing experiments are like on a scientific level inconclusive, right? But it's really interesting to me that they're not actually a hard no. Like some people interpret this as a hard, it's debunked because some of them were like negative, but over 50% of remote viewing experiments actually lended to the conclusion that remote viewing is real. So I think this is pretty solid data that it possibly is a thing. I think it leans towards yes, because if it wasn't real at all, it definitely would have been a hard no, right? A lot of people thought these experiments would all be a hard no, and the success rate of them guessing the object would be just like about what it would be by chance, right? Like maybe 5 to 10%. It was north of 50, right? We were looking at north of 50%. So remote viewing is not debunked. It's not proven to be true entirely, but it is much more positive data than you would expect. Now, we don't really know what the Soviet experiment said. We know that the Soviets attempted remote view spying. We don't know exactly what their data was. I don't think the KGB is really going to declassify anything soon. So there's a little bit of a jury out on that one. But now I'm going to talk about how you actually start astral projecting and how this is, sleep paralysis. So basically, there are a number of techniques. They're all, rooted in the same general structure. So I'm just going to go through the general structure that I think is the most common and the easiest. So basically, what you do is you lay in bed. When you are a little bit tired, but not full on sleepy, right? You don't want to fall asleep when you're attempting to induce sleep projection or sleep paralysis, because if you fall fully asleep, you can't really do anything with it. You're just asleep. So you want to be a bit tired. And the reason why you want to be a bit tired is if you are fully alert, this process is going to take a lot longer. So you want to be kind of just a little groggy, a little tired, but not exhausted. And what you're going to do is you're going to lay down in a position and you are not going to move at all. And by not moving, I mean lay with your mouth slightly open so that you're breathing in a way that is requiring zero movement. You want no movement at all. None. And think about what happens when you don't move a limb. It falls asleep, right? This is inducing sleep. So no movement, none. If you move, you have to restart your whole thing, right? Every time you even flinch, restart. You cough, restart, right? Complete stillness to the highest degree. And then what you are going to do, if you are attempting to induce sleep paralysis, is you're going to focus on every single thing around you, right? The way that I have always done this is by focusing on sounds, because obviously my eyes are closed and I can't move. So I pay attention to like minute sounds around me that I wouldn't otherwise hear, like the hum of a fan, the hum of, the AC, the sound of the street, the sound of the birds, right? Really every single thing. Because what you're trying to do is simultaneously make your mind very alert and focused while also putting your body to sleep. Think about those two things. Those are actually moving in different directions because you're becoming more aware while becoming less aware, right? And you have to be in a state of deep focus and concentration, right? You can't be, thinking about your grocery list, right? That's not going to work. You need to be thinking about, like, say, the sounds or the way your pillow feels, right? Complete awareness of the current moment, not distracted thinking. And this is why I think people meditating before bed can induce this state by accident, because a lot of people do meditate right before bed. And so I think the people who meditate who are putting themselves in sleep paralysis by accident are essentially just accidentally doing this, and they don't know what they're doing, so they don't have a game plan, and so it just becomes a horrifying experience. Because obviously when you're trying to astral project, you're doing all of this with a specific aim, right? You're not just doing this to have a weird experience, like you're aiming to leave the body. So if you get into this state and that's not, what you've accomplished, right? That's a horrifying state to be in, because your body's asleep, your mind's alert, your body of light is strong. And now I'm going to get into the body of light bit, because what you're going to do is you're going to progressively raise energy in the body. So while remaining completely still, which is obviously going to induce a sleeping state, you're actually going to raise as much metaphysical energy as possible. A lot of people just describe this as your body begins to vibrate. That's like a lot of reports of mystic experiences. It's like your body is vibrating, it's shaking, but it's not physically shaking, right? You can feel every single bit of your body of light, because now you're very aware of your body of light. And when people meditate or are in trances, they're very aware of their body of light. So you've increased the awareness of the mind and of the body of the light, but the physical body has lost all awareness and all movement, because if you just lay in the same position for long enough, your body falls asleep. When people do sleep deprivation torture, they always have to have some way that if you start to fall asleep, you're moved, because movement keeps you awake. Complete stillness puts you asleep. And then once you have raised all this energy, and this is the part that people in sleep paralysis don't do, right? People in sleep paralysis just exist in this liminal state, right? The state where they're aware their body of light is locked on, but they're not doing anything with it. So it's just a horrifying, horrible experience. And then, if you were doing conscious and chosen sleep paralysis, you would visualize yourself coming upwards. People often visualize grabbing onto a rope and climbing, or their body slowly lifting limb by limb, basically them coming out of their body while maintaining that cord. That cord is very, very important. There's a number of different techniques. If people want to learn to astral project, they just need to pick one and do it repeatedly. The one that I've always done is the lifting of every single part of the body, like basically a visualization of like levitation. There's a bunch of them. Really, I mean, there's no wrong one. If you're going to do this, you have to attempt to do this a bunch of times, because the truth is you can't astral project the first time you try. You have to do it a lot of times before you are successful with it. Like, this is something that needs repetition, constantly, repeatedly, tried at different times of day. For some people, right after they wake up, they have better luck. Some people right before they go to bed, they have better luck. You know what I mean? Like, it's a lot of work if you want to explore this. But when we're in sleep paralysis involuntarily, we also have to understand our body of light is essentially lit up. So we understand, our physical body exists, so does our body of light. When you do spiritual practices, essentially your body of light gets stronger and it becomes activated, right? That's why people talk about like opening chakras, right? Essentially they light up, right? And when you do Western esoteric rituals, like say the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, or the middle pillar, or the star ruby, right? All of those rituals strengthen the body of light and make it more visible. Think about that line in the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, which is a Golden Dawn hermetic ritual that says, "For about me flames the pentagram," right? What does it mean, for about me flames the pentagram? Not, of course, on your physical body, right? There's no burning pentagram coming off of you, right? It's coming off of your spiritual body, right? That's a body of light thing. So what would that mean? You're basically like a glowing orb. When someone is in sleep paralysis, even if it is not to astral project, they are essentially lit up, right? They are very, very visible. And so the reason why sleep paralysis demons happen is essentially you are laying asleep, but your spiritual body is behaving really, really weird. And so local spirits, and that would include evil spirits or scary spirits or even demons, become more attracted to you because they're curious, right? They see something strange and they walk towards it like a moth towards the light. So the reason why people experience sleep paralysis demons is because they are lit up on the astral plane to a really high degree. And this is why, if you are going to meditate or do any sort of spiritual practice, you need to have spiritual protection in order. You need to do all sorts of things, right? You need to cleanse, you need to banish, you need to purify. Because if you are, say, meditating, but you've got a lot of miasma and impurity around you, and you have no spiritual defenses, that meditation is ironically making you more susceptible to adverse spiritual experiences, even though you're trying to have better spiritual experiences, right? So you need to always be doing purification, banishing. That's why I recommend those practices so heavily, because they do protect you. Because there are good spirits. There are spirits we do mysticism to, but there are bad spirits, right? There is not just, good, loving spirits. That's not the whole of the world. So why on earth would someone want to astral project if they don't just want to spy on the Russians, right? I mean, there are many other reasons. So when you are able to leave the body, you are doing the ultimate transgressive act. So when people think of transgression within spirituality, they think of just being edgy, right? You hear this term left-hand path, right? The left-hand path in the West basically means anyone who has an edgier praxis than me, which is a shame because the original meaning of the left-hand path actually originates in Tantra with the term vamakara, which means finding divinity in transgression. So you actually see, even in the impure, there is still the pure, right? There is no separation between God and anything in this world, even things that seem, bizarre. And when we transgress, we are doing things that humans are not necessarily 100% naturally doing, right? And many say that when the spirit leaves the body in a situation like this, it is, in a sense, the most transgressive act that a living human can do. And it is one of the most mystically strong acts, right? Because you are literally partially severing yourself from the body. And you can have a lot of really profound spiritual experiences when you are in this state, because you are not just acting in a fully human form, so to speak. Once you've sort of disconnected it, like you are, of course, a human. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying you become a god or some nonsense. There is no becoming a god, right? There's only unity with the Godhead. But when you're in this state, you are a little bit higher. And that's what I mean about Yesod. That's what I mean about it's a spear higher than the spear that we are in the material world. When you are moving from the energetic double, you are moving from a slightly higher spear. You're not a god. Don't get egotistical and narcissistic about it. That's a good way to destroy your spiritual practice. Narcissism, leave it at the door. Egotism, leave it at the door. Don't pursue mysticism if that's your goal. But when you do these things, you are at a state where you can do a lot of really profound spiritual experiences. And there's a lot of really profound ways you can interact with the spirits you venerate and do mystic acts when you're in this state. Specifically, things like path working are very easy to do when you are in an astral projected state. You also are able to, explore all sorts of things. And certain initiations actually happen in this form, like certain occult orders, to get into them, you actually have to initiate through this form, right? The initiation is non-physical. And with, traditional witchcraft, the whole sabbatic flight thing, right? Sabbatic flight is often described as something that happens like when you're on certain hallucinogenic drugs. But even, if you take those hallucinogenic drugs, you're not necessarily going to achieve sabbatic flight, because you cannot achieve sabbatic flight if you are not astral projecting from the body. Those drugs are used as a gateway to make astral projection easier. Now, the thing is, you don't need to take any of those if you learn how to astrally project properly. So things like sabbatic flight are rooted in these type of techniques. There are a lot of spiritual techniques that are rooted in astral projection and the ability to leave the physical body to explore spiritual things. So it's a very open spiritual state. You're moving from a different form of the self. It's like a different version of who you are while simultaneously being who you are. I also want to discuss right towards the end here lucid dreaming. So lucid dreaming and astral projection are not quite the same thing. The big, argument against astral projection is that what people are just basically people who don't believe in astral projection make the argument that all experiences made in astral projection are essentially lucid dreaming that a person mistakes for astral projection. So like they're not saying these people don't have these experiences. They're saying that these experiences are, their dreams, not entirely real. And lucid dreaming, I will say, is a little bit different, but lucid dreaming also has that same mystic potential, right? Because lucid dreaming is when you develop an awareness that you are dreaming in your dreams, and then you're able to control your dreams. Because obviously, your mind controls all your dreams because they're just your subconscious speaking to you. But when you are lucid dreaming, you have a lot more control over what's happening, and you can manipulate the narrative, and you're much more aware and active, right? Your conscious mind is then present in your subconscious mind. And so, when you learn to lucid dream, you are actually learning to bridge the conscious and the subconscious mind in a really profound way. And so, learning lucid dreaming is a really good way to connect to these things and to have a better understanding of your subconscious and to have more spiritual growth. So I think lucid dreaming is completely powerful, especially in a way to understand the self and know thyself. And it's kind of just cool. Like lucid dreaming is fun, like being able to make your dreams, your fantasies and whatnot. It's sick. Like lucid dreaming is just awesome, right? And lucid dreaming is psychologically pretty much proven to be true. Like, of course, astral projection is much more disputed, right? Astral projection is a spiritual belief, but lucid dreaming is pretty legitimized. And if you just practice, you can learn how to lucid dream. It's about developing awareness in your dreams and recalling your dreams. I mean, you have to do your dream journal and all of this. So yeah, lucid dreaming, totally awesome. But kind of a different thing. Still valuable. I mean, you can, get a lot of inner work done. Like through lucid dreaming, you can, work through a lot of the things you're thinking about and just develop a lot more awareness. So yeah, lucid dreaming, totally awesome. That's what's happening in lucid dreaming. Our mind controls the dream, so of course we can become conscious, and then if we put in that much work. So in general, the gist of this is that the dream world is a huge part of the self and is important, and recalling your dreams is super valuable and is a completely powerful spiritual state, right? Your dreams are not random nonsense that your brain throws at you. Stop thinking your dreams are random nonsense, right? And yeah, I mean, that's kind of all I have to say. Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you want to support the podcast, we have a Patreon. You get a bonus episode 8 times a year. You get early access to every episode, and you get a pre-show every episode, which is a bonus mini episode I release alongside every episode of the show. I'm a professional astrologer and tarot reader. I have my booking information in the show notes and YouTube description if you want to book a reading with me. I do planetary mediation, traditional readings, and all sorts of tarot readings. I also host a lot of content everywhere. I'm under Dot Darling or Georgina Rose, DAT Darling, and Georgina Rose. I'm mostly on YouTube. That's like the most important stuff I do is it's all on YouTube. And if you're listening to this on YouTube, I mean, just go to the channel, like you'll see it. If you're on, a podcasting platform, just look it up. I also am on Substack. I release 2 articles a month about esoteric topics, and I go into really advanced topics typically on my Substack. So check that out. I also am on Twitter/X. I'm going to keep calling it Twitter. I don't want to call it X. And I don't care. It's my podcast. I can say what I want. I also am on Threads. I'm on Instagram. TikTok? Yeah, I'm on TikTok. I mean, I don't think I'm anywhere else actively. I have everything linked below, though, so you can find me everywhere. I mean, I put out a lot of work that you can see all sorts of places, and I'm completely supported by my viewers. I don't really get sponsorships and whatnot because my stuff is too weird. So yeah, any support means the world because that is how I'm able to take the time to do all of this. So you guys are awesome. And best of luck. This has been Pagan Perspectives, a show where we explore pagan perspectives on mundane aspects of life. And have a good day, afternoon, mid-morning, mid-evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are. Goodbye. Oh, one last thing. Like, comment, subscribe if you're on YouTube, and leave a review. Only a positive review, though. I mean, you can leave a negative review, but I would not like that on whatever podcasting platform you're on. All right, bye for real.